My name's Jacquelyn Meredith, and today I'm going to be discussing 5 questions about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. I'm going to discuss 2 of the questions in a little bit more detail than the other 3. So I'm going to start out with the question, were cells taken only from Black patients? And what demographic information describe the research patients of Johns Hopkins? So for this question, I'm going to skip to page 15, where it says, the public wards at Hopkins were filled with patients, most of them Black and unable to pay their medical bills. David drove Henrietta nearly 20 miles to get there, not because they preferred it, but because it was the only major hospital for miles that treated Black patients. It explains that this was the era of Jim Crow, so if Black people showed up at a white-only hospital, they were likely going to be declined of treatment. So I would say yes, the majority of the cells were taken from Black patients because that was the population at Johns Hopkins and at most public wards. And I also want to refer to page 30, and it says Dr. Thielen began collecting samples from any woman who happened to walk into Johns Hopkins with cervical cancer. These doctors definitely were willing to take these cells from anybody. I do think that Black women were the victim in this situation. The next question is, why does Sadie think Henrietta hesitated before seeing a doctor? So for this question, I'm going to refer to page 14, where it says, Sadie always figured that Henrietta kept it in secret because she was afraid a doctor would take her womb or her uterus and make her stop having children. So that's my answer to that question. I'm going to move on to, where does Cutie think Henrietta's cancer came from? For that question, I'm going to flip to page 81. He said that doctors say they've never heard of another case like Henrietta's. I'm sure it was either man-made or spirit-made, one of the two. He also talks about a spirit that he saw crossing the road to the family cemetery. So that is where he thought that Henrietta's cancer came from. The next one I want to talk about is, describe the analogy of benevolent deception in your own words. So I would describe benevolent deception as a lie or a misleading statement that is intended to benefit the person we're lying to and ourselves. In terms of medicine, I think this definitely takes people's rights away. Obviously, I think everyone can kind of agree on that. It takes away their free agency, and it doesn't allow them to make their own educated or informed decisions. And I wanted to talk about page 63. It states that doctors often withheld even the most fundamental information from their patients, sometimes not giving them a diagnosis at all. They thought that it was best not to confuse or upset patients with frightening terms they might not understand, like cancer. They said this was very common in this time. I don't think it's common anymore. I think it's very illegal. That's kind of how I would describe it in my own terms. The last question I want to talk about is, how did doctors justify using patients in public hospital wards as medical research subjects without obtaining their consent or offering them financial compensation? Do you agree or disagree with their reasoning? I believe it's on page 30 as well. It said, like many doctors of his era, Thielen often used patients from public wards for research, usually without their knowledge. Many scientists believed that since patients were treated for free in the public wards, it was fair to use them as research subjects as a form of payment. I would definitely disagree with that. I think that these people were taken advantage of. I'm sure there's so many other cases like this one where patients, and especially patients of color, were kept in the dark about their diagnosis or about cells they're offering up for research without even knowing. So I would definitely disagree with this statement. I don't believe in this logic. I'm very glad that this book was written so it can kind of give you a perspective on what she went through and just the heartbreaking story. I really enjoyed this book. Those are all the questions that I have to answer, and I've really enjoyed this class. I've had a great semester, so I wish you all the best.